Good afternoon. A warm welcome to Mr. Anujeet Kudva, a chartered accountant with over 17 years of experience in risk management, liquidity support, consulting, internal audit, credit risk, vigilance, operational risk, and fraud management. Mr. Kudva will speak about enhancing collections effectiveness with automation and analytics. Sir, over to you.
Thanks, Rakesh. So I think before I begin, I would like to perhaps congratulate the Saarthi team on completing, I think, 5 glorious years. So I think
Thank you,
congratulations
sir.
to your team. And I'm sure it would have been quite a fun-filled and I think enjoyable journey as well. So
Absolutely.
good luck to the entire team. I think great progress done, and I think a long way to go as well.
Thank you,
So
sir. Definitely.
So yeah, so anyway, so I'll perhaps begin my topic, and I've put together a few slides just to kind of keep it a little bit more structured. But I think it's important to understand that collections can be end, or we can take it even make it very conversational as well. So I think an interesting topic in terms of and something that's quite close to me as well in terms of what are some of the challenges that one's face when it comes to collections. How is collection as an ecosystem evolving over a period of time? What further needs to be done? What are some of the other digital lenders? What are some of the other banks, financial services companies? What are they doing? So a brief introduction about perhaps me, and then Avail. Uh, so I so I've got about close to about 20 odd years of experience within the financial services domain, and predominantly looking at risks, uh, you know, uh, and collections as well, which is an integral part. Avail Finance, the company where I work for the last 1 year, is a digital lender. We are in the business of kind of acting as business corresponding slash loan aggregator for multiple banks or NBFCs, and we manage the entire gamut of the customer relation, right from sourcing to evaluating these customers to even collections. And we've been using now Saarthi for close to about 6 to 8 months, and which perhaps today, in a very evolved shape, Saarthi and a few other voice bot vendors that we use are a very integral part of our collection infrastructure. So, with that introduction, let me get in terms of what collection or debt recovery, as we commonly call it. So I always tell my team that when it comes to collections, it's more of our art, right? Where there's essentially discipline. When I say discipline, I mean discipline in terms of reaching out to the customer, discipline in terms of ensuring that you're reaching out to the right customer, you're speaking to him in the right tone, the right mannerism, perseverance in terms of ensuring that just because a customer is perhaps being evasive, it doesn't mean that just you stop connecting with them, but its collection is all about persevering with the customer. And secondly, more importantly, it's all about customer engagement. How enriched and how in depth you will have engagement with the customers. So traditionally, right? And when I say traditionally, well, it doesn't mean that these practices were incorrect or these practices are outdated. A lot of these are still relevant, and a lot of these are still, done perhaps differently when we come to the current environment, right? So I think in a traditional approach to collections, some of the things that that were always there was, I think collection was very, very stereotyped. It was very SOP driven, right? So it said that X day pe collection EMI due hoga. On those dates, you kind of reach out to the customer, bank their natch, and wherever the customer doesn't pay, follow up for collections, right? So it was essentially all it was all a process which was very, very stereotyped, right? The strategy was very was consistent, or I would say similar for all customers. It never differentiated between what type of a customer it is, what the segment the customer belongs to, how is it, right? And I mean, it was all about, so perhaps that brought in some amount of consistency in the approach, but at the same time, some of these practices when it comes to today may not be relevant, right? Second, collection always included use of very harsh tone. So collection, when we talk about collection, it essentially meant that how 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 do you kind of threaten a customer, right? Usko kaise darane ka, kaise dhamkane ka. It was all about how do you kind of bring about collections by just kind of being harsh to the customer. Now it I think typically most when we associate collections, I think all of us believe that it has got to do with a harsh dialect and tone, right? Thirdly, there were challenges with respect to collectors' performance because because they were always different. The collections always had target drivens and others. So there was always challenges with respect to bias, fatigue in terms of customers. So different customers in terms of collectors, sorry. So collectors were always plagued with a lot of fatigue, a lot of bias, right? Collections were driven through personal visits. So you would come knocking on the customer's door and try to collect the customer's dues, right? Uh, there were manual trackers which gave very limited insights into the customer, and collections as a process was very reactive. So collections would only start once perhaps the EMI bounces and the customer becomes relevant. Now, some of these approaches, while they were very relevant uh, in those times, if we see them today, right, they may not be all that relevant. Now, why is that happening? You would see that today, when I look at a profit and loss statement of perhaps any digital company or any company that's in the business of lending, their top two costs are credit costs, which is essentially the delinquency and NPA, and second is the sourcing cost, right? So sourcing costs, perhaps I would say in today's terms, it is one of the highest, it's one of the largest costs, because when it comes to credit cost or delinquency, there are a lot of means and mechanisms by which you can reduce the cost as well. But sourcing cost is something which is very critical. It's a very competitive space, right? So and when to reduce these sourcing costs, it's important that you retain a customer. Now customer retention, which is no longer just a problem of the CRM system, right? So it's not just that. So even collection has got a very integral role to play. So if we use harsh languages, if we're not being compassionate to the customer, there's always a risk that some of these customers may go away from the company, right? Different customers expect that every customer today is aware of his credit profile. Everybody is aware of what his CIBIL scores are. So customers expect that based on the scores, if it's a customer who's got a better profile, he expects a better treatment, right? Similarly, when we look at our customer segments now, more specifically in times of COVID, the income levels are fluctuating, right? So customers are expecting both convenient repayment schedules as well as convenient mechanisms to make payments, right? So so if you look at microfinance companies today, right? So a lot of their repayments are scheduled as weekly repayments. Now the only reason for that is making it very convenient for the customer in terms of making payments timely. So more that the repayments are structured, which are very close to their income levels, that is helping microfinance reduce their delinquencies, right? Similarly, the regulator is looking at collections very minutely. We've seen issues in Hyderabad, Telangana, and all that happened. So any of these coercive practices, if implemented, are clearly seen as a violation by the regulators in terms of what the regulations specify. So some of these age-old traditional mechanisms which were there, while they were relevant then, in today's times, a lot of these seem a little bit outdated, and a lot of these seem a little bit out of place, right? So what exactly is happening today in terms of a paradigm shift, right? So we are clearly seeing that collection as a system is evolving, right? So there's a shift happening within collection and within collection strategies, right? So what are some of the must-haves that you need to have today when it comes to collections, right? So it's important that you don't treat all customers equally. It's important that there's a lot of customer data which is available with us, right? So as lenders, as financiers, there are a lot of smart ways in which you can profile customers, you can segment them better, and determine what should be the approach, what should be the intervention that needs to happen when it comes to using this data. Now, what are some of the things that companies have been doing? What are some of the things that Avail, here at Avail we're doing? I'll speak about it in the next slide. But when it comes to overall, some of the must-haves when it comes to collection strategy, it is essentially important that you have a proper segmentation of customers in terms of what their profile is, right? Uh, Second is you got to have a strategy around establishing connectivity with the customers, right? So when it comes to establishing connectivity, I think what you typically see is that it's important, and I think we heard Dheeraj in the previous session as well, right? Talk about depending upon the quantum of the EMI, depending upon the quantum of the relationship with the financer. It's important that you have strategies for establishing connectivity, and those strategies could be multiple. It could be in terms of the mode of communication with the customer. It could be in terms of the time that you establish connect with the customer. So these are some of the things which are very critical. So there may be customers who are who prefer that they only be called in the evenings, right? So if you end up calling the customer throughout the day, you'll always get that perhaps the customer is not reachable at all, and you'll put him into a bucket which says that a customer is not contactable. So insights around these is important to establish connectivity with the customer, right? We talked about modes of collection. So customers want flexible modes in which they can make payments, right? Now, when it comes to collectors' capability, it's important that there should be disciplines and perseverance. It can't happen that just because there's bias with respect to the way a collector is dealing with the customer, that impacts collections. So those are things which are non-negotiable. And most important, if one would have the privilege, I would say that I'll have one collector for every customer. But essentially, cost is an important factor. So especially when it comes to small ticket loans, some of these segments that perhaps Avail deals in, some of the segments that we see a lot of other finances deal in today, the size of the EMI has become very small, right? So you can't end up spending a lot of money in terms of collections because that will spoil the whole unit economics. So in these things, cost becomes a very, very important factor when it comes to developing an effective collection strategy. So what are some of the things that is being done, right? And I'm just going to put a little bit about generic, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on perhaps the next two slides, and then we can think about what Avail does as well, right? So what are some of the things that is being done today, right? So collections, when it comes, I think the first step in collections is essentially profiling of customers. So today, we've got data of the customer when it comes to perhaps data that we get from the bureaus, data that you get from his bank statements. There are data that you get from social media, right? So the data, you've got unlimited amount of data about customers, right? And behavioral data. So these are very important points when it comes to profiling of customers. These data can give me real insights about what's the segment that a customer is actually belonging to. Is he someone who's a traditional customer, who's a high risk customer, that he just takes a loan but it doesn't really have an intention to pay? Can he be a customer who's just getting over leveraged, right? Can it be a customer who doesn't need too much reminders? He's someone who's very ethical and disciplined in terms of his payment patterns. So data or insights about the customer is very critical. So today, perhaps the first step when it comes to having or defining a collection strategy is looking at data, looking at what are the data that I could essentially have, and in which I can profile or segment a customer, right? Some of the other things that we're doing is I think traditionally there were a lot of call centers who would typically call up customers, who would do reminders to customers, right? Now a lot of these things that we see is and I've intentionally put in the aspect that today a lot of these call center operations can actually be complemented by AI voice bots. Now it's what today we're doing with Saarthi, right? We're doing with a couple of other vendors as well, right? So in terms of essentially automating the entire call connectivity, and there are a lot of advantages to this, right? And I think initially there was a lot of hesitation in the system when it came to using AI voice bots for collections. But today, I can safely say that close to about 20% of our portfolio, or 25% of our portfolio today, is only and only collected through voice bots. There's no human being actually calling on any of these customer segments, right? And I think we've reached a stage where the effectiveness or the collection efficiency of these voice bots are perhaps comparable with what a human being would be doing, right? And it's been a journey. It's not been that all these things have been done just one fine day, right? So it's been a iterative journey. It's been a journey where we've kind of where we are learning. I think the Saarthi team is also learning parallelly, and I think collectively we've tried to reach some scale, and I'm sure that there's lots more that we can be done, right? I think today 25% is just a number. If given a choice, I would, in an ideal state, I'm sure there's at least capacity, I would say, to increase this to close to about 60 to 75%, right? Where our customers are just connected through AI voice bots, rather than having human beings call these customers, right? Now, there are other things which are being done in terms of predictive dialers, right? So when it comes to establishing connect with the customers, a dialer which is a traditional dialer which are there, these are just like these will just keep on calling a customer. But what this essentially does is customer also gets disgruntled in terms of ensuring that why am I being called multiple points in time. So today there's technologies evolved where there are a lot of predictive dialers where you can kind of establish connect. The dialers can themselves predict, and they can identify what is the most opportune time when you can actually establish connect with the customers, right? So these are things that we've been actually doing in terms of identifying certain using some predictive dialers. We've got a vendor that we are actually evaluating now, that's helping us develop a predictive dialer system, which will eventually integrate into our CRM system. What that will essentially help us do is that the wait time when a caller essentially waits for establishing connect with the customer gets reduced to a large extent, right? So these are some of the things that is being done, right? CRM system, I think all of us know about CRM system and the importance of CRM system, but a lot of these things, a lot of the the profiling aspect, the voice bot aspect, the dialer aspects, integrating it within the CRM system itself, so that there's clear cohesive one unified strategy to reach out to the customer. That is something which is being closely looked at, right? Last thing is voice analytics. I think one of the sessions earlier, I heard about people speak about sentiment analytics. Now this is something which is very important, right? We are actually, in fact, just started a pilot right now of looking at collection feedback, right? So it's simplistic technology where there's real time feedback that comes in through a system to our callers, in terms of telling them how have they fared, how have they fared in terms of that call, in terms of various parameters that they got to abide by, right? So so the system themselves prompts based on the language, the voice modulation, the tone of the caller as well as the customer, in terms of giving us very clear insights about how the call performance was, and how was the collector's reaction to the customer's dialect, right? So did the caller actually was he compassionate? Did he actually communicate effectively with the customer in terms of giving him details about his loan? So a lot of these insights that actually go in, and actually real time that go into the caller. So the system actually prompts the caller in terms of listening to the call and predicting in terms of what he or she should be doing, perhaps to drive more collections. Now this is in a very early stage. We're just doing a pilot, but that's where collection is going towards, right? Where in terms of giving very clear insights, in terms of how what a reaction of the caller should be, right? Is the customer sounding very casual? Is the customer sounding very evasive? is the customer intentionally trying to kind of evade the collector? So the system actually gives some of these prompts, and it gives them right upfront to give insights about what a caller should be doing. Right. So this is a little bit detailed about what are some of the things that we've implemented, and what further needs to be done. So we talked about behavioral profiling, where we've kind of implemented a machine learning tool. It actually predicts what's the likelihood that a customer is going to pay on the due date, right? And it also predicts as to what should be the due date of the customer. So with this tool, we can actually identify, or with this model, essentially not the tool but the model, we can actually segregate customers, whether the customer needs to be he doesn't need a reminder call, or does he actually need reminder calls even before his due date, right? So this model helps us predict that. Right. This model helps us predict, saying that is the first of the month the most opportune time to reach out to the customer, or is it the end of the month, or is it middle of the month? What is the most opportune time to reach out to the customer? Right. So this is something which we typically call within our parlance, we call it as a behavior scorecard. But this is something that which we use and helps us to kind of curtail some of our delinquencies. AI voice bots. Now, this is something that I think we started off with Saarthi, and I think today we've reached a stage where I would say we actually believe that Saarthi is an important partner for us in terms of the entire collection infrastructure, where we're using multilingual calling in human voice. There's real-time conversation across different dialects. So the biggest problem that actually when we went to Saarthi, I think the biggest problem that we were trying to solve is we are a digital lender which has got pan-India presence, and one of our biggest challenges today in collections is supporting multiple languages. And it's very difficult to get people with multiple language skill set, right? At the cost which we want to retain, right? So some customers only prefer speaking to them in perhaps Kannada. Some other prefer speaking in only English or Hindi, right? You've got customers from North who only prefer speaking perhaps in Punjabi or other languages, right? So I think having a AI bot, an intelligent bot, where it's easy to switch a language, and you don't have to kind of inconvenience the customer by saying that I'm hanging up the call, and I'll have someone else call you who's understands the language. That itself was a big I think that itself was a big differentiator for us, right, in terms of identifying first the utilization of the bot. So when it came first to kind of presenting the utilization of bot to our management, I think this is the biggest use case that we had, saying that we had one bot who could actually support. We initially started off with 4 languages, and then I think slowly, gradually, we've started expanding the number of languages now. The other thing was, I think typically when it comes to segments like we deal in, which is the blue collared segment, there's a lot of the collector always collector is the language or the dialect of the collector is very important, right? So we had issues earlier in terms of many a times where the collectors would use strong languages, sometimes unparliamentary languages, and many a times when we heard these calls, we would typically see that a lot of customers end up provoking the collectors, right? And because there's a lot of baggage that the collector carries in terms of perhaps how his day has fared, whether he's been able to work effectively. A lot of that translates into the conversation with the customers, right? And that was really not helping us in terms of having that customer connectivity. Now again, when it comes to bots, some of these things can actually be addressed with a click of a button, right? So whatever a customer may end up speaking, the bot can be really patient, can hear him out, and still respond in the most sophisticated language. So some of these things really helped us, and that's the reason why perhaps we've seen over a period of time that the bots have been quite important as the collection infrastructure. We talked about smart dialers. I talked about voice analytics as well. And no, of course, some of these strategies have not just helped us in optimizing our collections, but also being effective in terms of reducing our collection costs. So that's some of the things that we've been doing. So I think I'll like to leave the audience with a real question in terms of can voice AI actually be a disruptor? So today I think we're as the way that we use it, it's a complementing strategy, but can it actually be a disruptor and replace manpower to a large extent? Right. That's the question that I think everybody's looking at, and at least I believe that it's definitely got the potential, and possibly in times to come, in certain areas, definitely it can replace manpower to a large extent.
I think we had the similar question in one of the sessions earlier, and what you have said is absolutely true. It's more of like the question of not. It's not the question of if. The question is when. When can we have more and more scalable AI solutions wherein it could automate all the mundane activities, not just a select few. But again, we need to understand this, that AI is not about replacing the humans. It's more about complementing and enabling the human agents to make informed decisions, be and solve more complex problems where more and more empathy is needed, where the customer is distressed. So the human agents can be utilized to answer those queries rather than just to for the reminder calls or just for simple tasks which the bot is undertaking, or which
Yeah,
the bot can do that. So
correct. So I think that's I think the current journey of AI bots, right? Where
yes,
I think they're doing a lot of mundane tasks, but I think it's easy to train a bot, right? So today, if you look at if you can actually marry voice analytics, sentiment analytics in real time, I think a lot of the struggle today is that there's a lot of cost and everything spent on training, right?
true.
Because the kind of industry, the kind of times that we're living in, of course, COVID was a difficult time, but as the economy is revolving and the economy is evolving, getting out of COVID, we had a very populist budget also perhaps today. I think manpower and employee turnover, that's the biggest problem that most of us are dealing with, right? And
Correct.
that brings in a lot of costs with respect to trainings as well. So even in collection team, if you talk about a general industry, the monthly turnover is close to about double digits, right? Low double
Mhm,
digits.
mhm.
Now you end up spending every single time in terms of training people, and that's
Correct.
where I think not just mundane tasks, but even certain sophisticated tasks with these technologies. There's a play for some of these AI tools to kind of both complement as well as replace. I think in times to come.
Definitely, it's as and when the systems become more empathetic, more stabilized, in the sense it can understand humans in a more complex way. Then I think more and more tasks can be undertaken by the AI agents. Definitely.
That's right.
Uh, Anujit, we have a couple of questions from the audience, so I'm just
Sorry,
gonna show
which
it off
tab do I see the correct questions in?
here itself. I think now you can see it in screen.
Sorry, which?
Okay, so the question is how technology can help late bucket debt collection as well. So currently, most of the AI technology is being used in early buckets. So how do you think we can use these technology in late bucket collections as well?
Yeah, so I think so today, and I presume that collect the I think Gajendra's question is more on use of bots, right? Or is it generic technology? So I'll perhaps answer generic technology and technology slash data, and then I'll come to voice bots.
Mhm.
So I think even in late bucket collections, I think today there's I think one of the most the perennial problem about late bucket collection is the customer go skip. When I say customer goes skip, is customer is not contactable, right?
Correct.
And today, a lot of data insights help us do skip tracing more effectively. And just to expand, in a traditional setup, a skip tracing would involve visiting a customer, finding out from his neighbors, the customer's whereabouts and then doing a collection. But today, when it comes to data, there's a lot of information available on his social media. There's a lot of information that's available, in terms of alternate data, right? In terms of for the customers. So a lot of app-based lenders, uh, we get a lot of data from the customer as the customer keeps engaging with the app, right? And that's why this gives a lot of insights in terms of fetching alternate contacts, fetching near contacts of the customers, and helping out in doing skip tracing. So this is one side on the data, right? So technology and data, which can help us in doing, which helps us in enhancing late bucket collection. Second is, I think, the when it comes to the other late bucket collections is, I think the customer is very evasive, right? When it comes to connecting with the customer, right? Whenever a caller tries to reach out to the customers usually hang up the call. Customer will
Correct.
not pick up the call, right?
Correct.
Now, there are some of these strategies that we also did as a pilot for some of the cases, and we did it through Saarthi as well, right? Where what if you keep calling the customer continuously, right? And calling customer continuously to the extent of inconveniencing him and not letting him have access to his phone at all, right? Now if I have a human being doing it, it'll be very difficult, right? And he'll also get
Correct.
bored up. But some of these tactics that can actually use, even in late bucket debt collection, to establish connect with the customer. These are again things which are being used effectively to drive collections, right? So I think on both fronts, these are technology as well as data insights will is helping quite effectively also in late bucket collections.
I think we had another question from Mr. Gajendra, but you have already answered this question here, how we can use alternate data in the collections process. So I am going to skip that question. So I think, Anujeet, it was a very informative session, and I am quite thrilled to host this and interact with you. It was a pleasure listening to you.
Thank you. Same here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anujeet.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.